All right, strap in, everyone. Today we're tackling global drug development strategy.
Yeah, listener requests.
That's right, one you all asked for.
Yeah.
And we've got quite the pile of sources here. Everything from like ICH guidelines to API shortages, just the whole
It's the
shebang.
whole journey, right?
Exactly. So get ready for a deep dive into how a drug goes from like a scientist's light bulb moment
Yeah.
all the way to your medicine cabinet. It's a wild ride.
It really is. And it's getting more and more global all the time. You've got companies working together across borders, research happening all over the place. And then the final product.
It could be made on the other side of the world.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's start with the basics here. The rule book,
I
right?
mean, the ICH guidelines.
Yeah. What is this International Council for Harmonization thing? Why should anyone care?
Well, think of it like the UN for drug development,
Okay.
bringing together all these regulatory folks and pharmaceutical experts from all over, and they try to make the technical requirements for pharmaceuticals more or less the same everywhere.
So instead of every country having their own crazy rules, they try to find some common ground.
That's the goal, yeah. It makes the whole process way smoother. I mean, imagine a drug developed in, say, Japan. It's much easier to get that approved in Europe or the US if everyone's playing by the same basic rules.
Makes sense. But so it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of deal, though, right?
Not exactly, no. It's more like a baseline,
Fine.
a solid foundation. But then each country can, and often does, build on top of that. They add their own specific requirements and all that.
Like a global roadmap, but you still need a local guide.
Exactly.
Okay. So speaking of navigating these crazy complexities, we've got these CDMOs and CROs popping up everywhere in our sources. What are those all about?
The acronyms.
Yeah.
So CDMO is Contract Development and Manufacturing Organization, and CRO is Contract Research Organization. These are the behind-the-scenes heroes.
Unsung heroes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
providing specialized expertise, resources, things that a lot of companies, especially the smaller ones, just can't handle themselves.
Okay, so let's say I'm a small biotech company. I've got this awesome new drug candidate.
Right.
I'm going to partner up with a CDMO to take care of the big manufacturing stuff.
Exactly. They can help with everything, like process development, formulation, you name it. And most importantly, they make sure your whole manufacturing process is up to those crazy CGMP standards.
Those current good manufacturing practices
Yeah.
from the ICH guidelines.
Yep.
Yep.
And it saves the company a ton of money and hassle, too.
Not having to build their own factory and everything.
Exactly.
Makes sense. And then the CRO, that's for help with clinical trials.
Absolutely. They manage the whole crazy logistical nightmare, running trials across multiple countries, recruiting patients, collecting data, and they make sure everything's compliant with both the ICH guidelines and the local rules in each place. Essential stuff.
Wow. But if companies are outsourcing all this stuff, how do they stay in control?
Good question. That's where sponsor oversight comes in. The company developing the drug, they're called the sponsor. And they're ultimately responsible for the quality and safety of the product, no matter who's doing the actual work.
So it's not just about handing off the work and forgetting about it.
No way. It's about picking the right partners, setting clear expectations, and staying in close contact the whole time. Audits, data review, on-site visits, the works.
That's a lot.
It is. But the sponsor has to be sure their partners, whether they're local or overseas, are maintaining the highest standards. In everything. Quality, ethics, you name it.
Okay, so that brings us to another tricky point, right? Outsourcing overseas can save a lot of money, but it's also got risks. Our sources are all about rigorous oversight, due diligence, all that stuff. It's a constant balancing act.
You got it. Companies have to juggle so many things. The regulations in the country they're working with, the track record of the CDMO or CRO, what's happening politically, supply chain disruptions. It's a lot.
And sometimes things still go wrong, right? Like with those API shortages we've been hearing about.
Yeah. APIs, those are the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the heart of the medication, the chemical compound that actually makes it work. And when the supply of those gets messed up, it can have huge consequences.
So what causes these shortages? Is it just like one factory having problems, or is it something bigger?
It's a whole mess of things. One big factor is that a lot of API production is concentrated in just a few countries.
Okay.
So if there's a natural disaster, political instability, even just a quality control issue at one single facility, it can snowball. The whole global supply chain gets messed up.
The whole system's kind of fragile then.
Yeah, in a way it is. And that's why more and more people are talking about onshoring.
Bringing drug manufacturing back home.
Exactly, to reduce our reliance on overseas suppliers.
But that probably has its own set of challenges, right? Like, it's not just a simple flip of a switch.
Oh, definitely not. It takes massive investment, policy changes, workforce development. It's a long game, not a quick fix.
And then there's this BARDA thing,
Mhm.
which keeps popping up in our sources. What is that all about?
So, BARDA is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. It's a U.S. government agency.
Okay.
They focus on developing and procuring medical countermeasures for public health threats,
Yeah.
pandemics, bioterrorism, new diseases.
Looking ahead, trying to anticipate the next big thing.
Exactly. And their work is super relevant to these API shortages and the whole onshoring push. They support domestic manufacturing and research, so they're helping to build a more resilient healthcare system.
That's good. Okay, we've covered a ton here. From ICH guidelines to CDMOs, overseas outsourcing, API shortages, even BARDA. Wow. What's the big takeaway for you? What's the one thing you really want listeners to remember?
Honestly, I think it's how interconnected everything is. Global drug development is this super delicate web of regulations, partnerships, economics. If one little thread gets pulled, the whole thing can unravel.
Yeah, the long road to get a new medication to patients. It's not just about the science, it's about this whole global maze of rules and partnerships and money.
It really is. Speaking of rules, we should probably talk about getting a drug approved by those regulatory agencies, right?
Yeah, good point. Let's start with the U.S., the FDA.
The big one.
They're like the gold standard, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, they have this super rigorous process to make sure any drug sold in the U.S. is safe and effective. And even before they let you start testing on humans, you got to submit an IND,
An IND.
an investigational new drug application. It's basically a giant document with all your preclinical data, manufacturing details, and your plan for the clinical trials.
Like asking for permission to even start the game.
Exactly. And the FDA, they go through that IND with a fine-tooth comb, making sure the studies are ethically designed, the drug actually showed some promise in the lab, and that the manufacturing process follows all those CGMP rules we talked about.
So once the FDA gives the thumbs up, then the clinical trials can begin. But what happens after those big phase 3 trials are done?
If the phase 3 trials show good results, confirm that the drug is safe and it actually works, then the company can submit an NDA.
Another acronym.
Right, a new drug application. This is like the culmination of years of work. It's everything, all the data from the lab studies, the clinical trials, manufacturing details, even what the label's going to say, the whole shebang.
So the NDA is like the final exam.
You could say that. And the FDA, they really put it through the ringer, reviewing all that data, assessing risks and benefits, making sure everything's up to snuff. It can take months, sometimes even years.
Wow. And if everything checks out, then the drug gets approved, they can sell it in the U.S.
That's right. But even then, the FDA doesn't just disappear. They keep monitoring the drug after it's on the market. Post-marketing surveillance, they call it.
They don't just check it once and call it a day. It's an ongoing thing.
Exactly. They're looking for any rare side effects, long-term effects, things that maybe didn't show up in the trials. And if they find anything concerning, they can update the drug's label, change the recommended dosage, or even pull it off the market entirely if it's not safe.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about the U.S., but obviously drug development is global. Do other countries have similar processes?
Yeah, for the most part. The specifics might be different, but the overall idea is pretty much the same. Most countries have their own regulatory agencies, and they usually want to see the same kind of data. Preclinical studies, clinical trial results, manufacturing info, all that.
And this is where those ICH guidelines come in handy, right?
Big time. The ICH helps harmonize those requirements across different countries, so a company running clinical trials in multiple places can use basically the same study design and data collection methods. It saves a ton of time and money.
That's really efficient. But it makes me think about the ethical side of things. How do companies make sure they're doing things ethically when they're running trials all over the world? Especially in countries with different cultures or healthcare systems.
Ethics are huge, especially in a global context. Every clinical trial, no matter where it's happening, has to follow strict ethical guidelines. Things like informed consent, protecting vulnerable populations, having independent ethics committees review the study protocol.
Informed consent, that's a big one. What does that really mean?
It means that anyone participating in a trial has to be fully informed about what they're getting into. The risks, the benefits, the procedures involved, and their right to leave the trial at any time without penalty. And they have to understand all this too. It can't just be a bunch of legal jargon. You got to take into account the culture, the literacy levels of the participants, all of that.
So it's not just about getting a signature on a form, it's about making sure people really get it.
Exactly. It might involve using visual aids, having discussions, even talking to community leaders to address cultural sensitivities. It's a whole process.
So who enforces these ethical guidelines? How do we know they're being followed?
Every clinical trial has to be reviewed and approved by an independent ethics committee before it can even start. Sometimes they're called institutional review boards, IRBs. These committees are made up of experts from all sorts of fields, clinicians, scientists, ethicists. They look at the whole study protocol really carefully.
They're like the ethical watchdogs, making sure everything's above board.
Pretty much. They review the informed consent process, assess the risks and benefits, and they keep tabs on the trial as it goes on to make sure everyone's following the rules.
That's good to know. Okay, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about money. Drug development is a business, right? Companies have to make a profit to keep going and develop new treatments. So how does the whole money thing influence drug development, especially when it comes to pricing and access to medications?
That's the million-dollar question, literally. It's a tough balancing act. Developing a new drug can cost billions of dollars, and companies need to make that money back somehow. But at the same time, we need to make sure people can actually afford these life-saving medications.
It's a real dilemma.
Yeah.
How do you balance those two things, innovation and affordability?
There are a few different approaches. One is tiered pricing. That's where the price of a drug is different in different countries based on how rich or poor they are. So companies can charge less in lower income countries and still make money in higher income ones.
Like a sliding scale based on the local economy. What else?
Another approach is value-based pricing. That's where the price is tied to how well the drug actually works. So a drug that really makes a big difference in people's lives might cost more than one that only has a small effect.
So you're rewarding innovation and making sure people are getting their money's worth. Are there any other models out there?
Yeah, public-private partnerships are becoming more and more common. That's where governments, nonprofits, and pharmaceutical companies all team up to develop and distribute drugs. Often they'll focus on specific diseases or populations.
Combining resources and expertise to tackle a big problem together.
Exactly. And these partnerships can be really effective at getting life-saving medications to people who wouldn't normally have access to them.
That's great. Okay, this deep dive has been super informative. We've gone from all those nitty-gritty details about regulations and clinical trials to the ethics and the economics of it all. But there's one last piece of the puzzle I want to talk about. Technology.
Ah, yes. Technology is changing everything about drug development. AI, machine learning, new manufacturing techniques, all that stuff. It's making things faster, more efficient, and opening up all sorts of possibilities for personalized medicine.
I'm picturing scientists in futuristic labs with robots and flashing lights. But let's break it down. How is technology actually impacting drug development right now?
One of the biggest game changers is artificial intelligence, AI. AI algorithms can analyze tons of data, genetic information, clinical trial results, even data from patients in the real world. And they can use that data to find promising drug targets and figure out which compounds are likely to work.
Like a super smart research assistant who can see patterns that humans would miss.
Exactly. And AI isn't just for the early stages of research. It can help design clinical trials, find the best patients for those trials, even track whether patients are actually taking their medications as prescribed.
Wow. So AI is basically streamlining the whole process, making it faster, more efficient, and maybe even more effective.
Absolutely. But it's not just AI that's shaking things up. We've got advanced manufacturing techniques like 3D printing and continuous manufacturing. They're changing how drugs are made, making it more precise, more flexible, more customizable.
3D printing medications, that sounds like sci-fi.
It does, but it's happening. 3D printing lets you create personalized doses for each patient. It's especially useful for people who need a specific formulation, like kids or people who have trouble swallowing pills.
So we're moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach and towards truly personalized medicine.
Exactly. Using technology to develop treatments that are tailored to each person's unique genes, lifestyle, environment, all of that.
That brings us to another exciting area. Real-world data. How is technology helping us use that data to improve drug development and patient care?
So real-world data is all the information that's collected outside of those traditional clinical trials. Things like electronic health records, data from wearables, what patients report about their symptoms, even social media activity.
It's like this giant pool of information about how people actually use medications and what happens to them in their everyday lives.
Exactly. And technology lets us analyze that data to find out things we could never learn from clinical trials alone.
What kind of things? Give me an example.
Well, we can use real-world data to spot long-term safety trends, see how well drugs work in different groups of people, even predict which patients are most likely to benefit from a certain treatment.
There's so much information out there. But I imagine it's not always easy to use real-world data responsibly and effectively.
You're right. There are definitely challenges, like how do we protect people's privacy? How do we make sure the data is accurate and reliable? And how do we develop the right tools to analyze this complex data and get meaningful insights from it?
So it's all about finding that balance, using technology to its full potential while also protecting people's privacy and making sure the data is being used ethically.
Exactly. And that's a theme that's come up again and again in our discussion about global drug development. It's always about finding that balance, pushing the boundaries of innovation while also making sure things are safe, affordable, and ethical every step of the way.
Yeah, it's amazing. It makes you wonder what's coming next.
I know, right? For me, the most exciting thing is the possibility of truly personalized therapies. Treatments designed specifically for each patient based on their unique needs and characteristics.
Okay.
Imagine a future where we can predict and prevent diseases before they even happen, or develop cures for diseases that are currently incurable.
Wow.
And when patients have more control over their own health, it's a pretty incredible vision.
It is. It's a future where medicine is more precise, more effective, and more focused on the individual patient.
Exactly. And technology is going to be the key to making that happen. We're already seeing the rise of things like companion diagnostics.
Companion diagnostic.
Yeah, these are tests that help doctors figure out which patients are most likely to respond to a specific treatment.
Oh, I see. So instead of just giving everyone the same treatment, doctors can use these tests to choose the best option for each patient based on their genes or other biomarkers.
Exactly. It's about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach and towards more targeted, personalized treatments.
That's amazing. What about things like wearable technology and remote patient monitoring? It seems like those could play a big role in the future of personalized medicine, too.
Oh, absolutely. Wearable sensors can track all sorts of physiological data, heart rate, sleep patterns, blood glucose levels, physical activity, you name it. And all that data can give doctors valuable insights into how a patient is doing and how they're responding to treatment.
So it's like having a 247 health coach right there on your wrist,
Yeah.
monitoring your every move and giving you feedback.
In a way, yeah. And with telehealth and remote patient monitoring, doctors can access all that data remotely and provide care from a distance.
Wow.
It could really revolutionize how we manage chronic conditions. It could also improve access to care for people in remote areas and even help reduce healthcare costs.
That's exciting. But I also wonder about the potential downsides, things like data privacy, security, access. How do we make sure these powerful technologies are being used responsibly and ethically?
Those are really important questions. As we embrace all this new technology, we have to prioritize data privacy and security. We need strong safeguards to protect patient information and make sure it's not being misused.
Right.
And just as important is making sure everyone has access to these technologies. We don't want to create a system where only certain people benefit from these advances.
That's a good point. It's a reminder that technology is just a tool. It's up to us to use it wisely and fairly. Well, this has been an incredible journey. We've explored the complex world of global drug development from top to bottom. From those ICH guidelines to the power of technology, it's been fascinating to see how all these pieces fit together.
It's a complex and constantly changing landscape. But one thing is for sure. The future of drug development is full of potential to improve human health and well-being.
Absolutely. And that's a wrap for today's deep dive, folks. We've covered a lot of ground, from clinical trials to regulations to ethics to the economics of it all. And we've even gotten a glimpse of the exciting future that's on the horizon. We hope you've learned something new, but the incredible amount of work that goes into bringing those life-saving medications to your medicine cabinet. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and keep asking those tough questions. That's what the deep dive is all about.